I go, I'm putting on. Putting on, putting on. Everywhere I go, I'm putting on. Putting on, putting on. Everywhere I go, I'm putting on. Putting on. Where you from?
Welcome to Popcorn Sports on the Popcorn Entertainment Network. I'm your host, Mike Kyle, and welcome to yet another episode of Why You Should Root for every team in the NBA for the 2018-2019 season. I, of course, am not alone. I am joined here by Bryant West. You can follow him on Twitter at BSWest5. He covers the Sacramento Kings for SacTownRoyalty.com. Bryant, how you doing today, man? Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me. I'm a long-time writer at Sacktown Royalty, long-time, unfortunate Kings fan. Just hoping that this season will be more entertaining.
So my first question for you is how did you begin to cover the Sacramento Kings?
Well, it's actually pretty funny. I jumped on the bandwagon at pretty much the peak. The first basketball game I ever saw was Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals in 2002, which was the legendary Kings-Lakers season. And it was pretty much downhill from there. And by the time they started in their big rebuilding phase, which started in 2007, I was just hooked and wasn't going to be getting off anytime soon. Started writing for Sacktown Royalty about 5 years ago. And yeah, I'm proud of the work we're doing, and just hoping that someday this team is as exciting as we try to make them.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed, I've been in basketball and NBA Twitter for quite some time now, and in my opinion, that Sacktown Royalty is one of the best run SB Nation sites for all of the NBA.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, because it's so hard to cover a team that's been so bad for so long, but you guys just do it in such a fun way. I feel like you guys just really, I don't want to say embrace the bad, but there are times that you guys do in fact do that.
Yeah. Well, it's easy because the Sacramento fan base demands passionate coverage, even when the team themselves might not demand passion. But the fan base itself is just so diehard and will go to the ends of the earth for this team even when they're terrible. That I'm sure back, in 10, 20, however many years it takes for this team to be really, really good again, we're just going to be the most insufferable fan base.
Absolutely, and I fully expect that to happen. Hopefully that turn happens in the near future and not years into the future. So I want to kind of shift gears now and just talk about the general overview of the Sacramento Kings. So they joined the NBA in 1949 as the Rochester Royals. They moved to Sacramento in 1955. They had stops in Cincinnati and Kansas City. They're called the Kings due to a fan vote in Kansas City, being a counterpart to the Kansas City Royals, the MLB team there. Their colors are purple and gray. As the Sacramento Kings, they have 10 playoff appearances and 0 championships, and they play in the Pacific Division with the Lakers, Clippers, Warriors, and Suns. So now that we got all the really basic stuff out of the way, I want to talk about last season, because last season, it's in my opinion last season that you started to see the turn of the organization. Yes, they went 25-57 and they missed the playoffs, and they went 27-55, missing the playoffs in the West. But you saw it, especially with De'Aaron Fox, who looks to be a cornerstone piece for this franchise moving forward. They drafted guys like Harry Giles and traded for Justin Jackson on draft night. They have players like Buddy Hield and Bogdan Bogdanovic who really stepped up last season, and I feel like you're really just starting to see the foundation for the first time in years.
Yeah, I agree. This was the process that the organization needed to follow after they traded DeMarcus Cousins. It was very clear that their goal from there was to take the standard and correct rebuilding approach, which was bottom out, get the best players you could, and just trust that you have the coach from there. It's still a very big question mark whether the actual process itself will lead to anything significant, but they're following the process, they're sticking to it, they're not making, half-hearted attempts to be great this year, which, it was kind of somewhat expected because the Kings don't have their pick this year. It's either going to go to Philadelphia or Boston, depending on where it lands. So it was good to see the Kings, they've had this process for about 2 years now. They're trusting in the front office and the coaching staff, whether or not you believe in them long term, they're making the right move now just to keep the pieces together and give this rebuild, another year, see where everything fits, see which players need to stay, and take it from there.
And with the outcome of last season, they did end up drafting Marvin Bagley out of Duke with the number 2 overall pick. But kind of break down last season, and what were some of the positives that you saw from the Kings last year?
Well, in the beginning of the year, it was a little rough because, a young rebuilding team, you would want to see as much of the young guys as possible, and you rattled them off. De'Aaron Fox was a rookie, Buddy Hield was in his second year, and his first full year with the Kings. Harry Giles was stable to the bench while they redshirted him basically and tried to get him healthy. But the Kings had a bunch of young guys, and for a while they were playing the veterans way too much, and that kind of stymied what they were trying to do on offense. De'Aaron Fox was really hampered by the fact that he was having to play with Zach Randolph. Basically the fastest player in the NBA was getting slowed down by the slowest player in the NBA. About the All-Star break, the team kind of swapped and really went young guy heavy, and it was more exciting to watch for sure, and you could definitely see some improvements in the players. The most absurd thing about the Kings last year was just how ridiculously clutch they were for a team that just didn't have a great basketball IQ. There were so many games that they won in the last seconds that you don't expect or think can be repeated for such a young team still figuring out who they are. And towards the end of the year, there was a big outcry for the Kings. All right, you're going to stop playing your good players, you got to tank, blah, blah, blah. And the problem was that both their best players were actually their young guys, and they weren't going to take minutes away from those young guys just to try to get some extra losses. And I think the basketball gods kind of rewarded Sacramento because they jumped from, I think they were projected to have the 7th pick to the number 2 pick. And that was a big boost to the organization from there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I believe their odds, they were projected to get this. I think it was 6 or 7, and they moved up to number 2. And I remember being like, oh my goodness, they can cause that's the thing. The top of this past draft class was so heavy with talent. I mean, looking at guys like Bagley, Ayton, Doncic, or Trae Young, or Mo Bamba as well. And so when you saw that they went from, number 8 or number 7 to number 2, you're like, oh my goodness, this young team that performed really well late in the year is going to get another really good piece to add to that puzzle.
And it was about time, too, because the Kings had been in the lottery for 12 years, and they had not jumped up once. And they'd fallen back quite a few times. So going from 7 to 2 was a welcome sight here in Sacramento.
Absolutely. And now we can actually just talk about this year's roster, just going off of that. So you already mentioned some guys, and we both did. Buddy Hield, De'Aaron Fox, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Marvin Bagley, Willie Cauley-Stein, Harry Giles, Justin Jackson, Frank Mason, Iman Shumpert, who just played really well, Scala Bissiere, Zach Randolph. Kind of, what do you think of this year's roster and the expectations, not only for this year, but also going forward?
Well, I don't think there's any real expectations for this team. It's still part of the rebuilding process. It's still trying to figure out which of these players are actual players and who they can build around from here. But I will say that I don't think anyone in Sacramento expected this team to be quite as exciting as they've been in these first 4 games. They went from literally last place in terms of pace from last year, and they were first as of yesterday. The loss to the Nuggets last night dropped them down to 3rd in pace overall, which is still a marked improvement. This team is running really, really fast, and they need to really benefit the players that they've added so far. I mean, De'Aaron Fox demands the ability to just grab and go. He may be the fastest player in the league, and the way to optimize him is to jump up the pace as much as you can and surround him with shooters. And with Buddy Hield and hopefully Bogdan Bogdanovic coming back healthy, you've got 2 of those. The question marks that we had entering the season were really surrounding, okay, We've got two rookie big men coming in, Marvin Bagley and Harry Giles. What are they going to provide? What is this front court going to look like as we enter this NBA era of vastly different big men utilization than we have in the last couple of decades? And so far, it's just 4 games. Marvin Bagley has looked fantastic, far better than I think most people in Sacramento expected him to be on both ends of the court. I was really worried that the Kings were going to utilize Marvin Bagley wrong because, in college, it was a lot easier for him to handle his weaknesses in terms of he's a very left-handed dominant player, and there's always something to be said about he's an elite athlete, and he relied on that elite athleticism more than most guys to be able to score at a high rate. And while he did that really well at Duke, I was worried that the Kings were going to be putting way too much offensive demands on his shoulders early, and that it would kind of stymie his growth or weaken his approach to the game, which is the best part about him. He plays with a fire and a passion that you will not find in most guys. But he's just looked absolutely fantastic, especially last night. Finished with 20 points, 10 rebounds, 5 blocks against the Nuggets. He looks absolutely great for this team. I'm still a little concerned about how are they going to utilize him in the long run as a main offensive cog. What is his go-to move going to be? But right now, for a team that's 1-3, there is incredible amount of optimism in Sacramento, mainly because the Kings are running. They're 8th in offensive rating. They're 2nd in true shooting percentage. And most importantly, for a young team that didn't have much expectation, they're really fun to watch.
One of the things that I think was really interesting about the Kings selecting Bagley, number 2, was that they already have, and that's kind of been a little bit of a running joke in Sacramento, at least from what I've seen, is the amount of big men that they have in Sacramento. Bagley, Cauley Stein, Harry Giles, Scal. I mean, it's just you look up and down that roster, and it's oh, they have some freakishly tall dudes on it.
Yeah, and that was one of the main. That is an absolute criticism of the front office. They've used so many picks in the last couple of years on big men, and it's on one end it's kind of hard to shuffle everything around when you're so full of big men, and it's going to create some interesting lineup decisions for Dave Yeager. But on the other hand, none of the big men up to the point when they drafted Harry Giles had proven themselves an absolute foundational piece of this franchise. So if they really thought, okay, Marvin Bagley is the best player available, then they made the right choice to go with him. But it's always going to be a question going forward how the Kings went so in on bigs, and in an era of shrinking bigs, or at least bigs with different skills, they continue to keep pumping in these 7-foot guys, and at some point they're going to have to stick. You can't just keep drafting. Okay, Willie Cauley-Stein's been great the last couple of games, but is he a long-term piece of this foundation? Galabisio doesn't look like he is worthy of big minutes at this point. What exactly is Harry Giles? How is he going to develop and take over a role in this team? And, Marvin Bagley, is he really a foundational piece? They have a lot of bigs, and none of them have really proven that they are the guy yet. So hopefully at the end of the year, we will have a better understanding of the Kings' big man rotation going forward.
But one of the other cool things I find about the Kings roster is, yes, they have so many bigs, but also in the guard position and on the wings, they also have great players, or they have, I shouldn't say great, but, the potential to have a really good foundation there. It's there. Buddy, De'Aaron, Bogdan, Justin, and Frank. These are guys that could potentially just be really good role players. So they had, the Kings roster, depending on how you view it, can look really awkward, but can also look really good at times.
Yeah, I think De'Aaron Fox is absolutely a franchise foundational piece. And how good he gets in the next couple of years is really going to determine how far this team goes. And Buddy Hield and Bogdan Bogdanovic, it's a little awkward because they're pretty much both shooting guards, and to fully optimize the Kings, one of them is going to have to be playing against bigger forwards on defense, because you want to have them both out to help spread the floor and allow De'Aaron Fox open lanes to the basket. I think all three of those guys are certainly foundational pieces going forward. And, whatever else they get out of Frank Mason or Yogi Ferrell, it's just gravy. The guard rotation at this point is great for Sacramento. I just wish, as every Kings fan does, that there had been a little more emphasis on small forward moving forward, because it's such an important position in the modern game, and this young team would look a lot better if they really had a wing that was consistent, because Justin Jackson has not been that guy so far.
He is not, and it makes me really disappointed because I am a diehard UNC fan, and he is my favorite UNC player of all time. So it's one of those things where I've just been dying. I'm like, because that's the thing. So he's always been like this really like streaky player, especially in college. Like he had games where he didn't shoot well, but he'll still finish with 12 points, and there were games where he shot the lights out and he finished with 25. And I feel like that's really transition into the NBA for him as well. So I'm hoping if he just finds a rhythm, and there were times last year where he did, and the Kings looked really good with him on the floor, but there were other times, especially earlier this year, I think there was a game where he shot 1 of 6. I think he started off the first game of the year 4 for 10. So, it's like, it's there, but it's not fully there. But you can definitely kind of see it if he's able to get into that rhythm of NBA basketball.
Yeah, for sure. There was, his junior year when I think he shot 38% from 3.
Yep.
I think that may have clouded his long-term potential a little bit, because those first 2 seasons, better than most people, were not great shooting years for him, and I think that junior year was kind of an outlier, and right now it's a regression to the mean. I mean, last year I think it was something. I looked up a stat a couple weeks ago. I think something like 94% of his 3-point attempts were open or wide open, according to NBA stats. And you just can't make yourself a 3-and-D guy when you are knocking down open 3-pointers. So we all want Justin Jackson to succeed, because this team really needs a guy like Justin Jackson. But so far it hasn't happened.
Right, and like I said, I'm really hoping it just clicks one of these days and it rolls for a long time. But I want to focus now on the fan base, the fun, the culture surrounding the fans of the Sacramento Kings. So in my show notes, I have one, they're self-deprecating, which is something that we already talked about a little bit. And then they just want to be good. It's one of those things where they've just been down for so long and you're waiting for the tides to turn. So just kind of make your case for being a Sacramento Kings fan. Obviously, you said that you've been one for quite a long time, so you have the experience and the knowledge to talk about this. So kind of like just break down your view of Kings fans.
Well, you can't be a Kings fan if you can't be self-deprecating, because this team has just been so hard to watch for so long. And I live in deep Warriors territory, and every time I meet somebody new and they realize I like basketball, and they ask what team I cheer for, they're like, why? And it's just because Sacramento is so incredibly loyal to this team. We fought as hard as any fan base has ever fought to keep this team in Sacramento. This is our team. We just want to see them do well. And I'm going to tell you, there's a lot of criticism out there on all the fan bases of winning teams, just how annoying they are. Oh, my goodness. When Sacramento gets good, we are going to be an insufferable fan base, because we're just so crazy passionate about this team that someday that self-deprecating side of ourselves will go away and we'll just be a good team. And it's not going to be fun for 29 other fan bases to have to deal with that.
I think the interesting thing about the Kings is because, you just said it, like, you are so loyal. And I think a big reason for that is because Sacramento, like it's the only pro sports team in Sacramento.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so it's like when you have that, it's almost like putting a football team in Omaha, Nebraska, where that's like the only thing for miles. Everybody's going to focus towards that. And it's actually one of the reasons why some of these colleges perform so well. You look at Alabama in football because it's the only thing around that area where fans can cling on to. And so I feel like you have that same dynamic there in Sacramento as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for, all the on-court stuff and how much trust you have in the front office and the coaching staff aside, the Kings have done a really good job at building themselves in Sacramento. Like the new arena is gorgeous, top of the line, and it's still rocking even considering how bad this team is, because we're such a diehard fan base. In 5-6 years, whenever they make the playoffs for the first time, we're just going to remind the NBA, hey, this is as dedicated as you're going to find in the sport.
Do you think that so paint that picture for me. Let's say, I'll go 4 years from now, the Kings are rising in the Western Conference. Paint that picture for me, what that looks like.
Well, if you're saying they're going to make the playoffs in 4 years, that means that the current roster construction has succeeded, which means that De'Aaron Fox has learned to excel in the NBA thanks to his speed. He's become a fantastic off-the-dribble shooter and playmaker, and the team is continuing the high-pace era, flying the ball around to shooters like Bogey and Buddy. And, Marvin Bagley is a huge part of that now. Whatever you thought of him on draft night, he is, I think, the most important piece of this long-term foundation, not because I think he needs to be the best player for the Kings to succeed, but because of who you took him over. And if Marvin Bagley succeeds and becomes a multi-dimensional scoring threat, able to hit from the outside, which was able to attack the rim on overplays and with his quick first step, and able to dominate in the paint. I mean, he can be a foundational offensive player. It's just going to be, I think, pretty difficult to optimize. But if he, let's say for the sake of this argument that he is optimized, Harry Giles is helping, becomes this defensive stalwart we all think he can be, and bench whoever is there is pretty deep, man, this team is going to be fun to watch if they all hit their ceilings. And I don't know that I think that this roster construction is ever going to be a championship contender, but I would love to be wrong.
Extremely well said, Brian, and we'll wrap it up with this. You have 30 seconds to pitch anybody why they should be a fan of the Sacramento Kings this season. The floor is yours.
Well, the good news is for anybody who has tuned out of Sacramento Kings basketball in the last couple of years, this team is fun. I said it earlier, they're in the top 10 in pace, in true shooting percentage, in offensive rating. Their defense is still not up to par yet, but they are scoring with anyone. And they're a bunch of young gym rats. Every one of the foundational pieces that we have mentioned today has proven that they want to be great. They are working late. They are staying with the coaching staff. They are making all of the right moves towards being a good team. Now, will they ever be that great team? Maybe, maybe not. But the team is young, the team is exciting, and the team is working hard. And right now, the production has been really, really fun to watch.
Excellently well said, Bryant. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Bryant West. You can follow him on Twitter at BSWest5. He covers the Sacramento Kings for SactownRoyalty.com. Bryant, you got anything else to plug?
Nope. I think you covered it. Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you all so much for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. We're doing this for every team in the NBA. Odds are we've already covered your favorite team, and if not, they'll be covered in this next upcoming week. And with that, we'll see you next time.